Good morning. Welcome. Thank you. I'm not an inclement day because we've got a guest speaker from New York here, but dreary. Y'all join us in spite of weather. I'd like to also thank Texas Charter School Association and our co-sponsors for this event today. This is, of course, the Texas Public Policy Foundation. And my name is Emily Sass. I'm the Policy Director for the Center for Innovation in Education. Today's event is titled after the book that we will be discussing, How the Other Half Learns: Equality, Excellence, and the Battle Over School Choice. So we're here to discuss this book and dive into some of the questions that it raises. Mr. Pondiscio will be discussing his unmonitored observations on New York City's Success Academy, and he'll be sharing some of the secrets to their consistently impressive outcomes for children, but some of the questions that also get brought up when you actually embed in any school for a year and watch, as he asks throughout the book, what do the kids do all day? So our format will be, we'll bring up Mr. Pondiscio to present for about 15 minutes on his book, and then we'll bring up our other panelists, Colleen, Dippel, and Starlee Coleman, to continue the discussion. We will have time at the end for Q&A, so if you have a pressing question, keep that ready, because the more concisely you're ready to present that question, the more questions and the more answers we can get through from our panelists. Briefly on Mr. Pondiscio, he is a senior fellow and the vice president for external affairs at the Thomas B. Fordham Institute. He's also a senior advisor to Democracy Prep Public Schools, a network of high-performing charter schools in the New York City area. He writes and speaks extensively on education and education-related issues, with an emphasis on literacy, curriculum, teaching, and urban education, all things that he has direct experience with, because after 20 years in journalism, including senior positions at Time and Business Week, he became a fifth-grade teacher at a struggling South Bronx public school in 2002. His articles and op-ed columns on education have appeared in the Wall Street Journal, The Atlantic, the New York Daily News, Education Next, and many other publications. So as he has spent a year observing Success Academy firsthand, he brings both his journalistic prowess and his observational power as a teacher to what he brings, to what he condensed in this book today. Robert, would you join us here?
Good morning.
I warned everybody else about that.
And
Here we go.
No joke. I said my only job is to not fall as I got on stage, and thank you for doing that for me. Bullet dodged. I was just going to say that I told Emily I was going to take this cold, dreary New York weather back with me this afternoon when I fly home. So glad you enjoyed it. It's going back home with me. And thanks for having me, really. Education, broadly speaking, tends to run on aspiration and ideology more than evidence and pragmatism. That's not necessarily a bad thing. We ought to be aspirational for our children, our own and other people's children. But if we are honest with ourselves, then every conversation about education, at least every one that's worth having, quickly gets to, it's complicated. And if it doesn't, it's probably not a conversation worth having. So here's what you need to know about Success Academy, about my book, and by extension about charter schools, school choice, the programs and policies we've pursued over the last several decades, particularly those policies to aid our most unfortunate children, the children of low-income families of color, become well-educated and upwardly mobile. It's complicated. Shortly before my book was published, I wrote a piece for an education website called The 74, and it had this title: "Here's my new book, I hope you hate it." I meant it earnestly. The book and Success Academy is a bit of a Rorschach test. Whether you are a fan or a foe of charter schools, of this particular charter school of Eva Moskowitz, who founded and runs Success Academy, you will find evidence in this book that will support your views. But I hope you'll also see things in there that challenge your views and frankly make you uncomfortable. Education, particularly the choices that we make that impact low-income families, is complicated. But the narratives that we've constructed around it for the last several decades are uncomplicated and therefore, I would argue, unhelpful. Again, we're an optimistic people. Education is our most optimistic business. We want so badly for the stories that we tell about education, particularly for the poor and the poorly served, to be simple, to be clean, to be morally satisfying. We love tales of determined teachers, high expectations, tough love, muscular accountability that elevate every child. Put those things under one roof and then voila, equity, excellence, upward mobility. Then, of course, there is the counter-narrative, the one that says that the forces of poverty, of racism, of broken families, of dysfunction are so overwhelming, so overbearing that schools can't possibly overcome their effects. Fix those things, that narrative goes, and outcomes will improve. So that counter-narrative is equally simplistic. But I think it robs people, particularly low-income parents of color, of agency and of dignity. It suggests that they're powerless in the face of forces that act upon them, and they're just waiting to be rescued by the powerful and the privileged. That's no more satisfying of a narrative. And look, both of these narratives have outlived their useful life, but we're reluctant to let go of them because they're so morally uncomplicated and they suggest to us a clear course of action. So what I saw at Success Academy, and as Emily mentioned, I spent a year embedded in a Success Academy school literally across the street from where I was a student teacher and a few blocks away from a low-performing public school where I was a fifth grade teacher for several years. What I saw at Success Academy suggests to me the potential for some new narratives around charter schools, around school choice, parent empowerment, perhaps ones that are more honest, more potent, and most importantly, more sustainable. So let me start with the facts. Since its founding in 2006, Eva Moskowitz, and by the way, if this was a New York audience, I wouldn't need to tell you all this. You'd probably know this by heart because you'd have heard it so often. Since its founding in 2006, Moskowitz has grown Success Academy from a single school in Harlem to 45 schools, educating 17,000 children in every borough of the city of New York except for Staten Island. This is what's fascinating. That rapid growth from one school to nearly 50 schools in 13 years has not diminished their quality in any way. This is mind-boggling. Last year, there were 37 of those schools had children in testing grades 3 through 8. Consider this. Among those schools, the lowest performing one had 85% of its students pass the New York State English Language Arts test. That was the worst one. All the other ones scored higher. The school with the lowest pass rate in math had 92% of their students at or above proficiency. Again, all the others were better. And by the way, it was mostly well above grade level. 86% of Success Academy students earned a level 4 in math. That is the highest possible grade on New York State's tests. And let me not bury the lead. More than 90% of Success Academy students are children of color, mostly Black and Hispanic, low income, living in neighborhoods where the public schools have failed children and families for generations. So about 1 in 3, by contrast, about 1 in 3 Black and Hispanic children in New York City test at or above grade level in math and reading. So this is just not just a stunning level of success, but a stunning level of consistency. If there's another charter network in the country that can say it has literally not one bad school, I don't know what it is. That level of quality and consistency is just unprecedented to my knowledge. And Success Academies are not the joyless, militaristic cram schools that they're often portrayed to be in the media. Look, not everybody is comfortable with school uniforms, with kids walking in lines through the halls, being taught to sit up and track the speakers as they do, and a lot of other charter schools do as well. In a year in this one school and in other observations in other schools in their network, I never once saw a child treated in a way that I would not want my own daughter to be treated. The kids are happy, they're learning, they're warm, joyful places. Again, not for everybody. That's just not everybody's flavor of schooling, and that's fine. But remember I said it gets complicated, and here's why. Despite the fact that oversubscribed charter schools admit students by random lottery, it's simply incorrect to say that Success Academy gets these results with a random assortment of kids and families. So for every seat in their network, there are 6 applicants, but winning a seat in the lottery is the first step in the enrollment process. There are several small but non-trivial hurdles, if you like, that a family has to jump over from lottery in April until when the school year starts in August. I won't belabor the details, but first there's a welcome meeting at which Success Academy staff, to their credit, I want to be clear about this, they could not be more clear or emphatic about what they stand for and what they will not stand for. I describe one of these meetings in the book. The question that the parents get asked repeatedly is Success Academy right for you? Not right for your child, right for you as the parent. That's not an accident. It's a deliberate question. Success makes significant demands on parents to read with their children every night, to support safe and orderly schools, to understand that children, even as young as kindergarten, will get suspended if they break the rules. Parents are expected to be 100% on board with what Success Academy calls its culture demands. Long school days, half days on Wednesdays for teacher professional development, no transportation, no after-school programming, all of it non-negotiable. As one staffer told parents at this welcome meeting, this isn't Burger King, you can't have it your way. And that's exactly how the parents responded. They chuckled, but they're not kidding. They mean it. So what does this mean? Parents have to be motivated or curious enough about their alternatives to their zone neighborhood school to at least enter the charter school lottery in the first place. Then they've got to vote with their feet, affirming and reaffirming, showing up and showing up again through various for various meetings over the summer before the school year starts. So because at every step of this process, some number of the parents decide, look, Success is not right for me. Perhaps they accept an offer at a different charter school. Some of them just don't show up and they fall away. Perhaps it's because the schools make such significant demands on parents' time. That's just too much for some families, and is dishonest to pretend otherwise. The result is that the families whose children end up matriculating at Success are not there by happenstance or accidents. They are parents buying what Eva Moskowitz is selling, or they're desperate enough to go along with it. Moreover, they've developed or they've demonstrated a base level of competence, organizational skills, bandwidth, just simple bandwidth to show up again and again. And this appears to, I want to be clear, I'm reporting on this journalistically, not as a researcher with data. It appears to favor disproportionately a number of two-parent families who are employed, stable, religious and or spiritual, and who value the very thing that Success Academy critics deride, a safe, strict, and orderly school environment. Now, critics look at this and say, well, this is creaming, this is cherry-picking, but that's not the smoking gun they imagine. One, the families are not being cherry-picked by Success Academy. They are self-selecting into these schools. Two, Success Academy gets better results with those self-selected families than the gifted and talented programs in New York City get with children who are literally handpicked. That's incredible. If Success was its own standalone school district, it would be by far the highest performing school district in the state of New York. For some folks, there's something wrong with that. They think it's unfair. And yes, it is arguably unfair. What about the other children? But the question we don't ask, and this is the question raised by the book, unfair to whom? Is it unfair to parents who want their children to go to school with the children of similarly engaged and ambitious parents, or is it unfair to those left behind when neighborhood schools suffer an exodus of those families? I'll wrap up and just by saying, where I net out on this is it's important to be clear-eyed about all this. But what I would argue is let Eva be Eva, as it were. Let the families who are eagerly buying what Success Academy and similar charter schools are selling have what they want, and let's have more of them. But let's stop perhaps comparing them to neighborhood schools. They're different, and that's why they're excellent. Let's stop placing limits on the potential of low-income children, particularly in the name of equity. Let's stop treating children as public resources that technocrats can move around like chess pieces in the name of social engineering. If Success Academy is the poor man's private school, well, that's okay. There's a role for that in America, and it's something that hasn't been filled, at least in my part of the country, since the heyday of Catholic schools, which my parents attended. Frankly, I think most Americans would look at that, and not only would they not have a problem with that, they would probably say, well, it's about time. Thank you.
Thank you, Robert, and I'd like to ask our other panelists to go ahead and come up as well. Colleen Dippel, right here, thank you, wave, founded Families Empowered in 2009 and is the current CEO. Families Empowered is a statewide parent service organization that has supported over 90,000 families across 3 cities in Texas in navigating an array of options that are available to them in the area in which they live. She is a former public school teacher. She has launched a private sector education technology startup in the past. She's done so much. She's been awarded a Leadership for Education Equity's Emerging Political Leader Fellowship and an Aspen Institute Pahara Fellowship. So she's known nationally for what she's doing here. Starlee Coleman, please wave, is the CEO of the Texas Charter Schools Association, but her involvement in this issue extends even well beyond that current role. Her role is to ensure that TCSA's policy recommendations cross the finish line so that a high-quality public charter school is within reach of every student who wants to attend one. She has more than 20 years of experience turning public policy ideas into laws, and she has contributed to the passage of dozens of bills at the local, state, and federal levels through strategic public affairs, NPR campaigns, grassroots engagement, and coalition development. Her work has earned a Templeton Freedom Award for Best Initiative in Public Relations and the Spark Freedom Award for Best PR Campaign. So we're going to dive into some of the questions that Robert just raised in his opening remarks with these 3 people who have devoted their professional lives to trying to improve educational outcomes for disadvantaged children in New York, across the country, and here in Texas as well. So let's talk about how to do that. I'm going to grab all my stuff. You open your book by talking about something that you've termed the Tiffany Test. Can you tell us about that and how and why the student that you call Tiffany shaped your education career?
The challenge for me when talking about this is to do this without breaking into tears, which I seem prone to do. So I described the school that I used to teach at. It was PS 277 in the South Bronx. If you don't know New York City, the South Bronx, you've heard of it. It's the lowest scoring district in New York City. My school, PS 277, was then and still is, I believe, the lowest scoring school in District 7. So I was literally teaching in the lowest of the low, as it were. But there was a kid there named Tiffany. That was her actual name. And just to kind of give you the context, this was a school in which fewer than 1 out of 5 children were reading and doing math at grade level. I think it was 16% the year I had her were on grade level. Tiffany is what we would have called a double 3, meaning she was on grade level in reading and math in a school where virtually nobody was a double 3. Not only that, she was this incredibly dutiful kid. She would show up every day in her uniform, never missed a day of school, never missed a homework assignment. The building could fall down and Tiffany would just be scribbling away. She was just profoundly invested in the promise of education. It was as if her mother said, the teacher said it, you believe it, and that settles it. She was just that dialed in kid. So the moment that made her this impactful figure in my life was the day I pointed out to my special ed supervisor, look, I've got this kid, Tiffany, who I'm not doing anything for. And my special ed supervisor, the AP, said, verbatim quote, she's not your problem. And what she meant by that is, why are you even worried about this kid? You've got all these other kids who are 1s and 2s. You've got kids with special needs. You've got kids with IEPs. Tiffany is delivering the results that you need, okay? I didn't say that she was, she was on grade level. So the way I think I describe it in the book is this was, what I was functionally being told was, her starting line, or her finish line rather, read on grade level, graduate on time, is the starting line for my kid. Nobody would ever say that, to an affluent parent on the Upper East Side of Manhattan. Oh, we're not worried about your kid. She's not your problem. And it's just haunted me ever since. What could this kid have become if she were in a school, frankly, like a Success Academy, which did not exist at the time. There was only one charter school in our neighborhood at the time. It was one of the original KIPP academies. So fast forward 10, 15 years later, the Tiffany Test was, will this program or policy deliver results for that kid, this promising kid who is bought in, dialed in, and getting nothing in return? So what do I see at Success Academy? Tiffany. In every seat, Tiffany. Like that archetypal kid, where she was an outlier in my school, that kid dominates the culture. So I would argue that Success passes the Tiffany test.
Awesome. And Colleen, going straight to you, you founded Families Empowered, which helps students, many of them like Tiffany, help them navigate an array of options, as I said before, that they may not have known existed. Tell us a little bit about Families Empowered and what inspired you to found it.
Yeah, sure. So thank you all for being here on this rainy day, and thank you, Robert, for giving so much time to folks in Texas who care about this issue. Families Empowered is a statewide parent service organization. We're a non-for-profit. We provide parents with information, tools, and support to find schools that work for them. So we connect parents to schools and schools to parents. We connect parents to traditional schools. We connect them to charter schools. We connect them to Catholic schools and private schools. And in Austin, there's this micro school thing. So we connect parents. Even we've got parents now calling us about homeschooling. And so what we do is we are nonpartisan. We do not judge, and we don't preference one form of schooling or another form of schooling. We are parent-centered, parent-focused. And so we, as you said, I mean, we've over 10 years served lots and lots of families, and we've learned a lot about what parents want, and to some extent we know what they don't want. That's not rocket science. So what I would say is we're not necessarily serving Tiffany's, but the parent behind the Tiffany. And so as a teacher, I had some Tiffany's too. Sometimes they have the parents who are coming to us, and sometimes they don't. Sometimes the Tiffany is a self-motivated kid. So in our work, we serve newcomers to this country. We serve folks who are multi-generation, have lived in poverty for many generations. We serve working class and working poor people, and increasingly, in some cases, suburban parents. So folks who, for whatever reason, their school isn't working for them, right, or for their kid. And why did I found Families Empowered? Because I have been very involved in, quite frankly, the charter space for a long time. I was one of the original KIPP teachers back in the day. I'm proud to say I'm married to the co-founder. And they had wait lists. So Chris Barbick, who founded Yes Prep, and Mike Feinberg and I were sitting around drinking beer, and I was like, you have these wait lists. Where do these people go? And they said, we don't know. Not our problem. We can't help these folks. And then I just said, well, someone should help them. And they said, well, that's a great project for you to work on. So here we go. So 9 years later, with lots of fits and starts, we're working with folks in Austin, San Antonio, where Inga Cotton is, who we worked with and partnered with, and Houston.
Awesome. And you have changed a lot of lives in the process, Colleen, you and your team. Starlee, you advocate for charter schools in the state of Texas primarily now, and you've done this similar work nationally for years. What are one or two of the most common misconceptions or concerns that you hear about charter schools, and how do you answer them?
Concerns from regular people or concerns from people who are not normal?
Let's go with the regular people.
So one of the things that we see consistently over time across the country is that people do not even though charter schools have now been around for 25 years, people still just don't understand what a charter school is. They don't understand that charter schools are public schools, that they're tuition free and open to all kids. So that's one of the things that we run into all the time. We run into that here in Texas, everywhere. It's the same. That's the number one misconception that people have about charter schools. So, obviously part of our job at the Charter School Association here and charter advocates across the country is to make sure that people have a basic understanding of what a charter school is, how we operate, and how we serve kids.
Awesome. So I want to jump to actually a topic that much of education policy has been centered around for the last decades, a couple of decades, what we call the achievement gap. The persistent disparity between at least the attested academic proficiency, and we believe that reflects reality, the proficiency of minority students compared to their usually more affluent white peers. Many policies are designed just to minimize or narrow it, and often with little to no impact. A study came out, I think it was earlier this year, saying we've been working on the achievement gap, or we've known it existed for about 50 years, and nothing's really changed. So here we are. So Robert points out that Success Academy has incurred fame and scrutiny for actually reversing the achievement gap. In other words, Success Academy students are scoring higher on state tests than students in the most affluent districts in the state of New York. So why aren't people happy about those results?
This is one of the great ironies of education policy. We recite the homily that, every child can learn at the highest possible level, but when they do, we don't believe it. Make of that what you will. This gets into a different issue, and it's complicated. Okay, here I go again. How many times today? Count the number of times today I say it's complicated.
You'd make a great economist.
Was it Harry Truman's thing? I want a one-handed economist? I'm not that. Look, this is where it gets quite complicated because, I mean, a slight diversion. I walked into Success Academy expecting to write a book about curriculum and instruction because that's what I usually write about. It ends up being mostly about school culture, which is really driven by and made possible by choice and some of these screening mechanisms. One of the things I'm unwilling as a policy person and as an educator to be less than candid about is the effects of testing. I'm not anti-testing. I'm not anti-accountability. Did I mention that I'm not anti-testing and anti-accountability? Because I'm not. But you can't turn a blind eye to the effect that it has. And it's largely because of our well-intended effort to close the achievement gap. I'm an unabashed, unapologetic E.D. Hirsch disciple, core knowledge, cultural literacy. That's how you close the achievement gap, by giving kids the full range of science and history and art and music and all those kind of rich cognitive experiences that affluent kids have it baked into their lives. Well, if you tell teachers you need to get test scores up right now, I'm not going to do that. I'm going to do test prep. I'm going to do reading strategies. I'm going to do all this stuff that can give you this kind of sugar rush, but doesn't lead to long-lasting gains. So there's a disconnect that we need to grapple with in our policy, which is we are literally incentivizing bad teaching. Sorry to depress you.
So this is back to the question that I asked you in response to your first question. Do you want to talk about why normal people are not happy about the results about Success Academy? And I think I would say that they are. And then people who are not normal are not happy because, for a long time in education policy, we just trot out these tropes, right, about why some kids can't be prepared for life. They come from challenged backgrounds, their parents aren't engaged, blah, 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 right? And so when a school like Success Academy comes along and takes all of that stuff off the table and proves the possible for kids that people have said for generations are not going to be able to succeed and be prepared for life after school, we make liars out of the people that lie about kids, right? And the possibility for them. And that is extremely uncomfortable. And it begins to change, or at least put chinks in the armor of the political structure that props up policy built on lies. And that's hard, right? And that takes a lot. It takes a lot of courage and self-reflection for anyone in any policy environment to say the thing I have been saying for a long time is not right. And we have to fix that, and we have to readjust, and then we have to, in education policy, think about how much money we spend on schools, right? And continuing to maintain the things that we say are the right things for generations, right? Half of the state budget in Texas is spent on K-12 schools. That's a lot of money in a place like Texas. And if we have to change the whole thing, all of the interests that align around keeping things the same are challenged by that. And it's a lot easier to just say, as Robert said, that can't be right, we don't believe it, and or if we do believe it, the way they're doing that is wrong, right?
Yeah, I would agree. You're definitely calling, it calls an entire structure into question. Sorry, Colleen, didn't mean to cut you off.
So I guess I would just jump in and add like a little fly in this ointment, and I'm the non-policy person here at the Texas Policy Institute. We're not a policy shop. So like, I actually don't know that there is a policy fix. I think like, who's upset about this? This question of like normal, who are the people who are angry about this? Because in the state of Texas, I can tell you, it's crystal clear that parents want high quality schools that work, and these low income parents want high. How do I know this? Because we have extensive wait lists in high performing schools. We have families coming to us literally every day asking for help in Spanish and English to find a school that will work for them. And that's a school they want to choose, whether that is a high-performing charter school or a high-performing private school. They want options. So the question I have is like, well, who has a problem with this, right? There's a whole industry of people who are employed to sort of maintain the status quo. But so I'd argue, okay, maybe it is a policy fix. Policy isn't going to fix this. We should give parents their money back and let them choose. And then, guess what? Like, taxpayers probably won't have a problem with this. We're not seeing it. We see increased demand for options every single year.
The change is complicated. As
Let me somewhat play devil's advocate, because look, I'm a staunch choice and charter guide. This time tomorrow I'll be teaching at a charter school. It's what I do. There are legitimate arguments against this. I don't happen to subscribe to them, but let's put them on the table. Why would anybody oppose this? The subtitle of my book gets to this. I write that we have set equity and excellence at war with each other in American education. And let me describe exactly what that means. If you are white, if you are well off, if you have means, you have choice, you have options. My daughter went to private school. That was not only was that an unremarkable thing, it was unquestioned. You can go to private school. You can move to the burbs. You have something approaching perfect school choice. You are free to pursue excellence for your child. If you are a low-income family, well, then you get equity. And what I mean by that is, because it's controversial, and let me again put the well-intended gloss on this, because we care about low-income kids of color, because we want them all to be successful. We don't like even self-selection, seems anti-democratic to some people. There's an entire school of thought in education right now that, look, we're all about social justice, and that defeats social justice. My counter-argument is, when you lead with equity, even if it is for all the right reasons, well, now what you're doing is you can't stop affluent people from pursuing excellence. I mean, there was this whole varsity blues scandal, which kind of embarrassed, as it were, people of privilege. But as far as I know, private schools aren't going out of business, and $1,000 an hour SAT tutors are not, having any less demand. And I don't mean to be a smart aleck about this, but what's your answer? Like a hashtag campaign? You're going to embarrass privilege into renouncing the pursuit of educational excellence? That's your strategy? No, but meantime, what you're doing is you're making it impossible, or you want to make it impossible, for low-income people of color to pursue excellence. They get excellence, you get equity. So now you're no longer pursuing social justice, you are enabling aristocracy. You're enabling oligarchy. Those who have it get more of it. Those who don't have it don't get access to it. And this is your social justice play. Fascinating.
Yeah. So a lot of this centers on what's the definition of equity. Yeah. Do we pursue excellence with a focus on equity, or do we pursue equity?
Well, the theory is we should be able to give excellence to every child. That's a great idea. How's that working?
Actually, I'm going to follow up on that. You were saying in your introduction that a lot of times we like to talk about education policy in the abstract and the ideal, about this is what it should be for every child. And we want to keep those ideals in mind. But a lot of times we stay far away from the real life decisions that schools and teachers have to make every day. Something I found particularly compelling as I was reading this book was you, Robert, illustrated the kind of real life decisions that teachers and schools have to make through your own experience, and anybody who has been a teacher can relate to what he talks about. And can you tell us about the students that you refer to as Natalie and Tiffany? And what they taught you?
In the same class as Tiffany was another young lady who I call Natalie for privacy reasons, who was this larger-than-life figure in my school, and not necessarily for good reasons. Adults were literally terrified of this kid, including me. Her and her twin sister, foster kids, bad situation, volcanic tempers. I mean, they could literally tear apart a classroom. She became what I did every day, in a sense. Those of you who know education know the 12-1-1 model. That, for special education, 12 kids, 1 teacher, 1 para. I describe my classroom as a 24-1-1 model. It was 24 kids, me, and Natalie. If she didn't get all of my attention all day, every day, she would just fly off the handle. So, I mean, forget group work, forget projects, forget not just Tiffany, forget some of the other kids too. I almost couldn't do my job. At the same time, I felt very almost paternalistic towards her, like because she was fiercely intelligent and just this magnetic personality. When she wasn't flying off the handle, I was just really devoted to this kid. She dropped out of school after middle school. I ran into her in the street a few years ago. She was pushing a stroller. She had 4 children by age 22. I believe she's on public assistance. Again, maybe the most intelligent, native, and naturally intelligent kid I ever had. All the potential in the world, but just despite my efforts, despite everybody's efforts, things didn't work out for her. And those are stories we don't. And it wasn't just. It wasn't what I'm trying to communicate is the amount of my time and attention, and it came out of the hide of all the other kids, and we're not willing to be candid about that. But it is. And if you want to say, look, that's because you're a bad teacher, Pondiscio, and you should have differentiated instruction. Great idea. How's that working out?
And a lot of times in the policy space, we're able to sort of slip past confronting that very difficult moment that happens in classrooms all the time across the country, where teachers have to make decisions about how to address students with very different needs, capabilities, not necessarily because of natural intelligence, but just because of their life circumstances at the time, and drive. Circling back very quickly to the testing thing, that is a topic that's been coming up a lot in Texas as well as around the country. Success Academy is known for its intense test prep regimens. I think it's interesting you were saying schools tend to respond to tests by either dropping everything else and usually by just dropping everything else and focusing on test prep. But other schools, for more affluent students, you generally focus on a whole lot of other stuff as well and keep the extracurriculars. It sounds like Success Academy tries to do both.
Yeah, they to put it bluntly, they put test prep on steroids. I mean, they really do it aggressively. And it's interesting because, well, one, on the other hand, the sum of the student experience at Success Academy really is knowledge rich. I think I said this in the book. E.D. Hirsch, even though it's not a core knowledge school, would probably feel quite comfortable there. They get science every day. They get all the art, the music. They're forever doing field trips. Where I was trained as a teacher to teach kids reading by making everything that they read reflect their own experience, look in the mirror, as it were. The sum of the student experience there is it's looking out the window. So it's cognitively rich, even though they do a lot of the test prep. the interesting thing for me is because I have this complicated relationship with testing and test prep, and I don't like to see students' entire education given over to it. By rights, I should have really disliked Success Academy, right? So I found myself at the end thinking, why don't I dislike this? And I think I even said in the book, like, is this like Stockholm syndrome or something? Am I like falling victim to or sympathizing with my captors? But to be earnest about it, think about this. If you are a low-income kid of color in a place like the South Bronx, what reasonable expectation do you have to believe that you're going to, get something out of a place called a school? School is where generations of low-income kids of color have gone to learn how smart they're not, to learn how little is thought of them, how limited their horizons are, etc. And by contrast, even though this is about testing, that's not what the experience is like at Success Academy. You're not told the test is easy, you're told that it's hard, but you're prepared, and your teachers are busting their backs to get you prepared with attack strategies, and they're calling home every night to involve your parents, etc. Everything you are told is this is hard, but you can do it. And look, the teachers are profoundly invested in the kids. If you spend time there and don't see it, you don't want to see it. Okay, regardless of what you may think about this flavor of education, the staff are deeply, deeply invested. So then what happens? You prepare for months for this thing called the ELA test and the math test, and you crush it. And so do all your friends. And your parents are in on it, and their parents are in on it, and it creates a culture where it not just normalizes success. I mean, it's stamped on their genetic code. You go home thinking, I'm good at school, my friends are good at school. I'm now growing up in a school community where I go home thinking, hey, I'm just as good as those kids in Jericho and Scarsdale and whatnot. Even though it's about something that I may not necessarily like, I don't like that it's all about testing. That's game-changing, right, to use the cliche. Where else does that happen?
So I'm trying to think of the differences between the test prep culture that you just described and how parents in affluent schools across the country approach SAT prep, and I'm struggling to come up with a difference. Yes.
So can I absolutely make myself like the most unpopular person in Texas education policy by saying I think testing is great. I think we should test kids a lot. I think we should hold teachers accountable for the kids' scores on tests. I think we should hold kids accountable for their scores on tests. Life is a test, right? Like sometimes
it is only a test.
Sometimes you have to learn things quickly and then demonstrate your knowledge or your ability to do those things quickly, right? Who do we help in the world by pretending like there are not times in your life where you have to demonstrate your knowledge? Like, I don't understand why that has become like a philosophically questionable thing that we should say, at the end of the day, you should know something, and we're going to find out if you know it. And for teachers, at the end of the day, your kids should know something, and we're going to make sure they know it. And for me, you're going to get paid because you made your kids learn some things. I just am like routinely confused by people who think that that is a not okay place for us to be. My husband was a reporter in DC for 20 years covering Congress and the White House, and I remember we were having this really interesting conversation. He was interviewing a member of Congress when ESSA, the new No Child Left Behind, was up for consideration. He was talking to a member of the delegation that he covered, and she was going to vote no on ESSA, and he was asking her why, and she said, well, I just, I have a problem with the increasing push towards testing and accountability in schools and whatever. And so he, obviously, this is what I do for a living, and so we're sitting across the island talking about it that night, and he's like, where do you come down on all of that stuff? And I was like, well, my fundamental question is, if we don't have a measuring stick, an objective measuring stick, how do we know if a kid is learning? And how do we know if a teacher is doing a good job? I literally do not know the answer to that question if it is not a test. Like, Robert?
Yeah, no, I'll jump in. I don't disagree with you. I mean, I disagree with you on testing, not because I'm anti-testing, just because it's more complicated than that. It may work for math, it may work for subjects. It literally damages reading, and we don't have time to go into this. But what I will say in strong agreement with you is nobody should sentimentalize how good it was before testing, okay? It was not good before testing. It's not like there's some golden age that we're going to go back to. What you go back to when you get rid of tests is screwing poor kids. Forgive my bluntness.
So yes. So I just want to jump
that doesn't make the test perfect, and that doesn't mean it incentivizes the right behaviors. For the 47th time, it's complicated.
Measuring sticks usually only measure one thing at a time, unfortunately.
Yeah, I can't uncomplicate it.
Yeah.
So I read the book. I enjoyed the book. I loved the book. That's why I was like, you need to come to Texas.
There's a but coming.
No, there isn't. And I also think what I want to make sure I put you on the hot seat for, because I feel like, yeah, okay. We've spent a lot of time in the last 2 days together. What I love as a former teacher, I also think what you bring up in the book, so I'm actually going to put in a plug for the book right now. And really what I loved, and you said you thought you'd write a book about content, and you wrote about culture. But I think that the testing, I mean, I actually agree with you. I don't know about more testing, but I'm fine. I think we should have really clear, rigorous tests so that we know what kids know and are able to do, and that we can compare apples to oranges and provide good feedback and all the good stuff that it's supposed to do. And so I'm not anti-testing, and I will probably get a private SAT tutor for both my kids. So yeah, and this is what people are doing. But the rub is when you are asking kids to perform, and they feel shame, and they feel all this stuff, and they are in classrooms where schools are not supporting teachers. And what I love about your book is that you also, the relentless focus on teacher and like real clarity that success provides to teachers about what is expected from them. They are provided supports, they are provided feedback, they are provided with like really rigorous high expectations, like there's a churn. And this is another complicated issue you raise, right? Which is like, where are these teachers coming from, and what are we doing for them? Right? So like, these are the people in the classroom all day. And as a former teacher, I do have some sympathy, right? I was thrown into a classroom ill-prepared as a Teach for America Corps member with crappy training, and I had no curriculum. I didn't know what I was supposed to do. And 6 weeks in, I was supposed to have parent-teacher meetings, and I was like, I don't have any grades. Like, what? So I think it would be really useful for you to also, there's a combination, which is like, you can hold people accountable if the people in that room with those children have what they need to be successful. And I think there are lessons learned that could be applied across the board.
Well, and we've got an interesting situation too. You were talking about Success Academy, where students are pressed to succeed and do succeed because of the supports that are in their lives and natural bent and so on. But it is a different scenario when you're talking about a classroom where, as in the majority of Texas, over half of the students statistically are not expected to pass. That is a different impact on school culture. So just to echo Robert, again, it is complicated, and my concerns about testing come when you look at those students and think, if those students do not have supports, if they're not expected to pass, if their teachers, are ill-prepared or don't know what they're doing, and there's no way we can get the child there. What are we doing for those children? How do we change the game for them?
For their teachers.
Yep.
I think.
No, I think that. Thank you. I think that's right, and testing is fair when it rewards the behaviors that you want from teachers. Apropos of that, while towards the end of my reporting, I asked Eva Moskowitz, well, what portion of your program do you think would translate to K-12 at large? She said all of it, not surprisingly. My answer is less than that. But one thing that absolutely would translate, and I would argue should translate, and now I'm going to go back to my original first purposes of being a curriculum guy, they have a curriculum. This may seem obvious, even anodyne to folks who are not in schools every day. Schools don't have curricula. there was a RAND study some years ago that showed almost literally every teacher in the country, 98% of ELA teachers, I think 97% of math teachers, rely on, and I don't remember how it was worded, materials I create myself and or find in teaching my subject. So that means who is teaching your children? Well, it's Google, it's Pinterest, it's Teachers Pay Teachers. I'm not kidding. I mean, this is literally every person in America, or every teacher in America. They're calling audibles at the line of scrimmage all day, every day. That's what we do, and that's crazy. So what do they do at Success Academy? Even though I don't think is necessarily, they make curriculum decisions that are not necessarily the ones that I would make. They have a curriculum, and here's what this does: it changes the job of the teacher. We can do all kind of things and make all kind of changes in education. The one thing you cannot do is add hours on the clock. There are 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, and you ain't getting any more. If anybody could figure out a way to get more, it'd be Eva Moskowitz, by the way. This is even beyond her. But her teachers have a curriculum. So the job of a teacher at Success Academy is you are not an instructional designer, you're an instructional deliverer. You spend those hours studying student work, practicing the lesson, deepening your own knowledge, calling families, building relationships. Pay attention to that, SEL fans, that works out for you. You're a pure pedagogue. And as a result, even relative novices, it's a shockingly young place, they're all in their 20s, with relatively little experience, get these incredible results. Now they work them really, really hard. There is tremendous churn, as you say. But I think if there's one lesson that can be learned, it's give teachers a damn curriculum, please. Let them practice that. Let them get good at that, as opposed to what I was told, literally one of my first days in the classroom. Oh, Mr. Pondiscio, you're the best person to know what every child will need. Are you out of your damn minds? Just got here. That can't be true. So change that.
If I could wave a magic wand, right, for the next 3 sessions here in Texas, I would have the House Public Education Committee and the Senate Education Committee rename themselves the Teacher Preparation Committees. And all we would do for the next 3 sessions is talk about how to make sure that our teachers, in whatever school they show up in, a charter school, a district school, whatever, that they are ready to rock, right? If you want to make regulations, great. Let's make some regulation about how to make sure that teachers are awesomely prepared for the incredibly difficult job that they have. But why do we tinker around with all of this other stuff that we think is going to fix the problem and then continue to let literally basically anybody who wants to be a teacher with no preparation for this insane job?
Can I blow your minds? I have a master's degree in elementary education. If there was one thing you think my degree program should have covered, what do you think that should be? Teaching children how to read?
Right.
Nope.
Right.
Nope. You learn that on the job. Yeah. This is like telling air traffic controllers, "Oh, you'll learn how to land a plane when you get to work." We don't cover that here.
Right. Or what? There is literally no other job that I can think of that is hard and challenging that anybody who wants to do it gets to do it, right? Do you want to go to a doctor for knee surgery from a doctor or a surgeon who just decided that he wanted to be a surgeon but didn't go to medical school and has no training in that? No, right? You probably don't want to do that. And I just feel like it's bonkers that we just decide, right?
Or
that
comparison, to kind of pull both of yours together, a doctor who went to medical school but didn't spend time actually examining the model of a knee and doing, I don't know, some practice surgeries on...
learning how to do surgery.
That's vocational training. We don't do that.
Yeah, it's really silly. And when we look at all, if you just zoom out on our problems in education, right, it's not, we have demonstrated this over and over again through lots of different types of schooling, right? Charter schools, private schools that take kids from extremely challenged backgrounds and get them ready for the world, all kinds of stuff. Magnet schools can do that too. But when you just zoom out, it's not the school where they show up. It's, are we filling the building full of adults that are ready for the task? Mm-hmm. And we demonstrate that over and over and over again, and the answer to that question is no, we are not.
As well-intentioned as they may be.
And so nothing else that happens matters.
But I think that gets to this level, or this question about preparation. there are 3.7 million teachers in American classrooms. If you have 3.7 million of anybody doing anything, you're going to get a normal range of human abilities. But for years in education reform, our play has been, oh, we need to attract the best and the brightest. Well, there's not 3.7 million of those. This is my point about curriculum. In other words, I invoke Donald Rumsfeld with this. I say you go to school with the teachers you have, not the teachers you wish you had. So you have to make those teachers successful, because the people of average ability is who you have. It's all you're ever going to have. So you have to make the job doable by those people, and that it involves the way they're trained in education school. That involves the way they structure the job. It does not involve adding more things every year to what they do and never taking anything away. It's almost like we conspire to make them unsuccessful.
Totally. So I would just like to add, as a person who hears from, our organization hears from a lot of unhappy, sad, scared, frustrated parents, and so this is a people industry. People, we say this all the time, people trust people, not institutions. They just don't, right? And teaching is a people profession, right? And so the things that we hear when people say, oh, why do parents want school choice? Why do parents want options? Why do parents look for charter schools? These schools are marketing. It's like they don't even have that much money to market. Like, they're not good at it, actually. They're hearing from other parents. They're actually quite bad at it, as you know. Yeah. And what they're hearing from what they say to us is, I don't hear from the teacher. That's a people problem. Mm-hmm. I don't know what's going on in the class. The teacher's not giving work. My child's being bullied. The stuff that is people problem. I don't know any parent. Mina works with me. She might be like, "Oh, you're wrong. We have 7.5 parents," because she's the data nerd. But we don't have parents who call and say, "My school's quartile testing in this subgroup was not great, and I need to move them." What they come and they say is like, "My kid is being bullied. My kid can't read. My kid has had 3 teachers in 3 months and no homework. And it's chaos." This is a people business. So the real question, right, is where are these people coming from? Where are they getting supports? And I'm going to throw the big elephant in the room for a next thing that you need to be focused on. It's just like, and who's holding schools of ed accountable?
Yeah, and I'm gonna throw one more quote from the book here. I actually was trying to find it because it was so important that I wrote it down. If we define a good school as one that serves all children equally well and effectively, we might as well concede that there is no such thing as a good school and never will be. I'm just going to drop that there and move to one final... Yeah, that's yours. I just stole it. I'm just going to move to one final topic that I want to hit, and then we need to go to Q&A. From multiple conversations, you came to the conclusion that while education policy wonks and advocates may want the word charter to be synonymous with innovation or academic achievement or excellence, among many parents, it mainly remains a synonym for safe. What does safe mean? How does that relate to a school's culture?
Yeah, maybe it's different in Texas, but talk to any charter operator in New York where I live and work, and they will say, look, I wish the kids and the families were coming here because we're a classical school, we're a Montessori school, we're achievement first, or democracy prep where I teach. Generally, the driver is safe. The perception is that the district schools are unsafe, and charter still has this halo effect that says safe.
Starlee, you've done some work looking into that actually in Texas, I believe.
Yeah. So I have been curious about this question. How many parents are choosing charter schools because of the perception of safety? Number one, and then is it true that charter schools are safer? And so we've done some looking into this. And data-wise, on the second point, charter schools are objectively safer for kids. There are far fewer incidences of bullying, of drug use, of assault, sexual assault. The big stuff, right? Guns on campuses, serious physical assault. I mean, it just doesn't happen on charter campuses. We can look at state data and see all of that stuff. Schools have to report all of this through the state's data system, and it just It just doesn't happen. They're objectively safer. And so the interesting thing about that is that like a known thing that parents just inherently understand, and do they care? So we just did some polling in Harris County recently. The context of the polling is that, as everyone in this room will know, the state is about to take over the district, and so I was really like genuinely curious what people think about that. And then, of course, will there be blowback on charters because of that? And if anti-charter voices are able to spin this as, the state is coming in to take over the district because they want to charterize the whole district and all of that, like what's going to happen there? And AFT people, I'm sure you're listening. Guess what? It's not going to work out for you the way you think it is. So that's number one. But one of the things that we tested while we were doing this polling was asking about the safety question. 83% of registered voters say that the fact that charter school campuses are safer is one of the most compelling reasons to choose a charter. 83%. That's huge. And when we looked at the crosstabs of who said that. Females, moderates, suburban voters. The second, and that was for them, that was like 86%, right? And then for Democrats, African Americans, and millennial parents, they're in like the 75%. I mean, like, it really matters. And this is not, like, we've had a lot of conversation in Texas over the last couple of sessions, and it's just going to keep getting louder and more ramped up about discipline policy, both at ISDs and charters. But of course, the fire is trained on charters. And here is the thing. If we want kids to learn, they have to be in a safe and orderly environment, right? That does not mean that we should kick kids out of school because they chewed gum in the hallway, right? And we can do both things. We can create a safe and orderly environment for kids so that they are focused on learning, while also making sure that silly abuses are not happening. We can do that. We can create a policy structure that accomplishes those things. But the idea that there is like some magic special thing that's happening at charter schools and like why kids are learning, and when you look at just the stats of what happens on those campuses and how safe kids feel and how invested the parents feel in keeping those campuses safe and orderly for their kids, like that's not magic and that's not confusing. It's not complicated, right?
And
like
that goes back to the whole question of school culture. Parents choose this because they want a certain environment for their students, and that safety is part of, I would think, a school's culture that they are creating, parents are buying into, and students are experiencing. I want to pursue this so much more deeply, but I do want to give time for the audience to weigh in on what's most important to you after what you've been hearing. So let's jump to Q&A. If you've got a question, let us know. Clint's got a mic in the back. Please do wait for the mic for the folks who are watching this by live stream. Yes, you, sir.
Hi there. So I definitely admire the success of the charter schools. But one of the main problems with the charter school is that they are part of the public school system, and as such, you're kind of at the mercy of the school boards and other politicians that could just shut them down at a moment's notice because they object to the lack of social justice and all of those kind of issues. Wouldn't it be better to get more kids into private schools, like through school vouchers or tuition tax credits, that sort of thing, instead of depending on charter schools being allowed to exist within the public school system?
Shirley, do you want to? Colleen?
I'd say yes, but I'm not sure how politically, and you tell me how this is going in Texas. I think we'll get there eventually. Because look, I think it's
not well.
I almost think it's inevitable. Again, I started at my educational career as a teacher and a curriculum guy. I've become much more choice-oriented over the years of necessity. I just wrote a piece about this for AEI not that long ago. There was an incident a few weeks ago where Nike pulled a sneaker off the market because it had the 1776 flag on it, and that was a problematic symbol. I don't mean to be dire, but if we've gotten to the point as a nation where we're so divided that we can't decide whether the American flag is a symbol of pride or oppression, we think we're going to send all of our kids to one single school? Really? I think it's going to feel like taking off a pair of tight, hot shoes when we embrace a more open vision of of choice and pluralism, rather than start to insist on imposing our wills on one another. I just think the time has come.
So at Families Empowered, we kind of get branded as the charter organization because we work with lots of families and who are looking for quality schools, and charters are right now like the alternative option. But what's interesting is I say we're not a charter organization, we're not a voucher organization, we're not a fix the district organization, we're a parent organization, and we have consistently asked parents, right? Like, if you would you consider a private school, a religious school, even assuming some tuition? And every year, a majority, like most of those parents say yes. And also, many of the parents who come to us are waitlisted at very high-performing charter schools. And we'll often say, okay, so you're applying to a charter school, and they're like, what's a charter school? So again, this gets back to parents are not, the policy stuff is like really important to policy wonks, but Texas is out of step, in my view, with what parents want, which is high quality options, right? And so the thing that matters are things like discipline and culture, and Catholic schools provide those in abundance. And so, we've polled families, asking them actually if they would be interested in religious instruction at a charter school that would be co-located in a Catholic building, and the answer was overwhelmingly yes, right? So people want moral formation, they want values, they want discipline. So to answer your question, yeah, all of the above. I actually think what we ought to be, when I said before we should give our money back, that was a very glib, unhelpful way of saying we probably, but I don't think it's an either or. I think charters are a structure right now that provide the best hope for choice and opportunity. I think we need more of that because parents want it and deserve it, and we're not delivering the outcomes kids deserve with the current structure.
Can I make two quick policy points, though? One, I bet everybody knows this. This was a surprise to me, and I work in education. The rest of the world is far more pluralistic than we are. I mean, I'd always assumed for many, many years that the way we do it in this country, government-funded, government-run, was the de facto default setting. The rest of the world is really not. Ashley Berner of Johns Hopkins wrote a terrific book a year or two ago called No One Way to School about exactly that point, how the world is just much more pluralistic than us. But from a pure policy standpoint, what is the public's interest? The public's interest is in a well-educated citizenry, period, full stop. Nothing in that implies under whose roof and the mechanisms by which we do it.
Thank you for that question. And actually, I'm going to use this gentleman as an example. He did a great job of exactly what we need from people asking questions. So I will just preemptively say thank you for that. Please make sure that your comment or question does in fact end with a question mark so that we can make sure to answer the question that you have. Thank you. And I saw a hand over here. Thank you.
Robert, you made a great point about illustrating the difference between equity and excellence, and it sounds like Success Academy has made a clear choice there in favor of excellence. A lot of charter leaders would like to do it all, and they struggle with the issue of being inclusive and also being excellent. So at what point does a school need to decide, or does it need to decide sort of one or the other, and avoid failing at both?
It's a great question, and I don't feel qualified to offer an answer. And I'm not. I don't mean that as a cop-out. People come into this work for any number of reasons. Colleen and I last night were at an event with a charter leader, and I asked this person point blank, would you, if you had the ability to screen students, not that Success screens, as I said before, they enable self-selection, but I asked this person point blank at a high-performing charter school, if you had the ability to handpick kids because you could create the culture, etc., you could do more for more kids, would you do it? And she said no, because she said ethically that's not why I'm in this work. And that's a legitimate and a respectable point of view. But it's also something that should be transparent to parents. Where this is an elite school. This is, I make a joke about this. In Manhattan, where my daughter grew up and went to school, affluent parents can parse the differences between these elite private schools like Talmudic scholars. I mean, they act as if not only is Horace Mann and Fieldston not the same thing, that they're not even remotely the same in terms of, and it's crazy, right? There's excellent schools. There's no reason to expect that parents can't make those fine-grained distinctions, and frankly, teachers. This is another argument for choice. What are you doing this work for? Do you want to be in an elite college-bound environment? Do you want to do CTE? Do you want to do core knowledge? Do you want to do classical education? The more choices we have for parents and for teachers, the better we'll be.
That's a good point. And that's actually, your question is one of the biggest questions that was on my mind as I read the book, and I phrased it as, what about the outliers? What about Tiffany, who was an outlier in her classroom because she actually was showing up, dedicated, wanted to learn, had parents probably very involved in her life. But then what about the outliers in Success Academy? There was a boy you mentioned who was struggling with some behavioral challenges, and at that school he was the outlier. At another school he might have been your average student. At that school he was the outlier. So what do we do with the outliers? Because they are the hardest students to meet the needs. Wherever you are, whatever an outlier looks like in your school, those are the ones you're going to struggle to meet the needs of the most. And I had to come to the conclusion I came to was, I cannot tell a school or a classroom, I cannot tell you from here what the answer is. I wouldn't want to. I don't know enough. It's a complicated enough issue that it's very, very difficult, even for the person closest to the situation, but I know that as a person very far removed from the situation, that I'm probably not going to be helpful to you.
What Emily is modeling for us, as we say in teaching, is humility. I'm serious. It's knowing that what I don't know is more than what I do. Boy, would that be nice to have in education policy.
But I think too, Emily, like your comment has really gets to the heart of why the school system structure that we have right now is not working for a whole lot of kids, right? Because we have an assumption, or we pretend, and I think Robert alluded to this before, that the same school, the same setting, the same environment, the exact same structure and stuff, right? All the ingredients are going to work for every kid. We just fundamentally know that is not true. That's not the case. And by continuing to pursue policy monotony, right, where we just refuse to acknowledge what we know to be true, that kids are just different and they need to be in different environments, and then letting all kinds of environments emerge so that each kid is in the right kind of setting for them. We're just going to keep being put into these false choices where we can have excellence and equity if every kid is allowed to be in the kind of environment that they want to be, because we will be able to get to the place where that kid is in the environment that inspires excellence or fosters excellence for them, and we just keep doing
you know why we do that though? And again, I'm going to point out the good-natured, the well-intended background to this. Here's what we do in education policy, tacitly or explicitly. We assume there's a right way to do this. Right? We assume there's a model, and we're going to discover it. And once we do, everybody has to be that thing or have a really good reason why they're not that thing. Okay, it's all about scaling, because we want to create good schools for every kid. Here's what scales brilliantly: mediocrity.
Yeah.
That's what scales.
Well, we also like to make decisions for other people's kids.
Or
period. We like to make decisions for other people's kids.
Yeah, how's that working out for us?
We're so smart.
Okay, this gentleman back here, and then we'll go to you, ma'am.
I had the privilege of the last 2 days spending it with an 8th grade teacher in a suburb of the city of Chicago. The suburb has a railroad track, metaphorically, good side, bad side, same district. She doesn't care about teaching because she's got 8th grade students that don't know how to read or write. She has tried things to mimic the Success Academy. She gets blowback from the other teachers because we don't do it this way here. She gets blowback from the parents because you're taking our role away from us. This is our job to do that. and I can understand and we can talk about the pathologies in what we do about it. But if you're stuck in a district like that, suburb, funded, and there doesn't seem to be a charter alternative, what do you do to try to start to clean the crap up? What's step number one?
It's complicated.
I wish I knew. I wish I knew. No, I mean it's also it's easy. I used to say this to my fifth graders. I can say it to policy people too. It's easier to keep up than catch up. So I mean, I don't have a good answer for eighth graders who are reading, many years below grade level. What troubles me about the example that you cite is the indifference on the part of her colleagues and the part of even parents. That's kind of troubling.
It does speak again to the importance of school culture. The Success Academy's created something that parents and their children buy into, and if that's not there, I mean, a very different culture could predominate. And as saddening as that is to me, I don't know how you can fix it if you don't have some kind of adult nexus that's willing to build a culture. And it sounds like your teacher friend is one person trying to change that. And I wish her all the best. And she will actually be in my thoughts and prayers tonight, because I can't think of a harder job than that. Changing culture.
Thank her
as
for
one
persisting.
person.
The things they do is just pass the problem up, because in their system, they can flunk out an eighth grader and prevent them from going to high school. So all of a sudden now they just take a big swath of kids and put them on the street and say, okay, high school is now better.
Yeah.
I don't think that'll work.
One last question from you, ma'am.
I had a question going back to, you're talking about the recruitment and onboarding practices with Success. So you've got a charter school that, we've all said, charters serve all students, which is true to a certain extent, but it's those students that go through the hoops and meet the deadlines, buy the uniform, show up on time, so on and so forth. In your experience at Success, how can you, or what did you see, or what do you suggest for us to help families understand that? Because I think that our generic message, which is great that we share with people, is that the charter schools are public schools, they serve all students, but how do we tell them about, well, actually, there's a caveat. Yes, they serve all students, but there are some other things you need to know about in order to stay at that school and keep your seat.
Well, I don't know that other charter schools go to that extent. Some do, some don't. I think there's a range. A lot of charter schools work very, very hard not to enable self-selection. And frankly, if Eva Moskowitz was sitting here, I'm sure she would take issue with that description. There are charter schools that bend over backwards to attract and hold on to kids. They're not interested in that kind of culture keeping. They're there to save all souls, so to speak. So there's a range of practices, and I think that's appropriate. And look, frankly, it's easier to do that in a place like New York City or any major urban center where they've got 1.1 million kids. In my hometown of Medusa, New York, there's one central school district, and you're never going to see an appetite for charters there. They like their local school just fine. But I'm not sure I answered your question about onboarding. I'm not sure I understood. What was your question about onboarding? Oh, onboarding the parents.
How do we explain that to parents in a way that you've seen work?
Yeah, how they did it there is bluntly.
Well, that's all the time we have for on the official program. I have two recommendations for you if you were intrigued by this conversation and want to keep it going. One is you can purchase the book on Amazon or anywhere else that books are sold. And you can also come up and talk to our panelists after this with your thoughts and questions for as long as they are able to stay. I want to thank you all for coming today. And we hope you'll join us next Tuesday for our event entitled The War on Poverty, which will be examining Lyndon Johnson's Great Society, the inspiration, the implementation, and the effects of that over the years. There will be a strong educational component to that as well as we examine what the Great Society has meant for education. That'll be here, 9:30 to 12:30. I'm going to run us over time because we have one final thing. Colleen.
Yeah, so this is an audible that I'm calling. Just what I think we should. Robert's given a lot of his time to folks in Houston, and you all today. No, you're rolling your eyes, and everyone here should appreciate this. It's really important. This is a really really complicated, important discussion that we're having. And he's agreed to come back and spend more time for live streaming in San Antonio and elsewhere, and people want him. So I think it's just important for us to give him a warm Texas welcome on a cold, random Texas 2 days. And so I have a little gift for him that everyone here will appreciate. Thank you. We appreciate you. Thank you very much. It's a mug from Buc-ee's.
I will put in my plug for the fine work that people, Colleen, Starlee, and others are doing. This is an intriguing state. These are not. No, I didn't mean that. I didn't mean that in the sense of the Chinese curse. I meant that earnestly as somebody who spends his time in schools. There's so much dynamism here. I want to come back because I'm that weird guy in education policy who spends his time asking what do the kids do all day and then wanting to spend time in school. So you'll probably get bored of seeing me in the next couple of months.
Well, we look forward to having you back. Thank you to all of you, our panelists today, and thank you to you. Safe travels home. Thank you.